Here's a full cinematic-style 1600-word article version of your story, crafted for YouTube narration. It flows like a heart-touching drama without headings, while keeping the pacing engaging for viewers. He had more money than he could ever spend in 10 lifetimes. His name was etched on skyscrapers, engraved on the wings of private jets, whispered in business circles with both admiration and envy. Yet when the doctors told Alexander Grant that his body was failing, he only gave a bitter laugh. The cancer had spread beyond surgery, beyond medicine's reach. He could buy everything, except time. So, he refused every treatment. What was the point of stretching out days filled with pain, loneliness, and regrets? He signed the papers, waved the nurses away, and told the hospital board that he would live the remainder of his life exactly as he pleased, unmedicated, unbothered, and untouched. He had no family left. His empire had consumed marriages, friendships, and even the chance to be a father. To the world, he was a giant. To himself, he was just a man waiting for the final curtain. Nurses came and went, offering polite smiles, following orders. None dared to question his decisions. Except one. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Hart, a physician who had chosen medicine not for prestige, but because she could not stand the idea of people suffering alone. She had seen Alexander's type before, wealthy patients who treated hospitals like hotels, who believed money could bend the rules of life and death. But when she looked at Alexander lying in that immaculate private suite, refusing help, she didn't see arrogance. She saw exhaustion. She saw fear disguised as defiance. And something in her heart told her she couldn't just let him slip away without a fight. The first time she walked in, he barely glanced at her. "Another one. Save your breath. I've already signed my death sentence." His voice was rough, laced with sarcasm. Evelyn didn't flinch. She set down the chart and pulled a chair beside him. "Then maybe," she said softly, "you need someone to sit with you while you wait for the sentence to be carried out." That was the first time in weeks that Alexander looked at someone long enough to notice the gentleness in their eyes. Days turned into a routine. Evelyn came by even when she wasn't assigned. She brought books, sometimes reading to him when the pain in his chest made it hard for him to focus. She adjusted his pillows, scolded him playfully when he skipped meals, and once even smuggled in his favorite black coffee, though it was strictly against the hospital diet. "You're risking your career over a cup of caffeine," he muttered, trying to hide a smile. "No," she replied, "I'm risking it to remind you that you're still alive." Slowly, the walls he had built began to crack. He found himself waiting for her footsteps, listening for her voice in the hallway. She talked about her childhood, about the nights she studied by candlelight because her family couldn't afford electricity. About her brother, who died because there was no doctor in their town fast enough to save him. That loss had fueled her choice to wear the white coat. "I swore," she said once, her eyes glistening, "that I would never let anyone give up on life without at least trying." Alexander listened, but more than that, he felt something stir inside him. No one had spoken to him with such raw sincerity in decades. Business partners, employees, even lovers, they had all wanted something from him. Evelyn only wanted him to fight for himself. But he kept resisting. "You don't understand," he said one evening as rain tapped softly against the window. "I've built towers, fortunes, empires. And yet here I am, alone in a bed, with nothing to show for it. What's the point of extending a life that has already failed where it mattered most?" Evelyn leaned closer, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You're wrong. Life doesn't fail because you made mistakes. Life fails only when you stop giving yourself permission to feel, to change, to love again. Maybe your time is short, but it's still yours. And it can still mean something." Those words haunted him. That night, Alexander dreamed of his younger self, ambitious and unstoppable but also lonely. He dreamed of the family he never had, of a child running down the halls of a home that never existed. He woke with tears on his pillow, something he hadn't allowed himself in years. The next morning, against his own pride, he asked Evelyn about the treatments he had refused. She explained the risks, how aggressive they were, how painful they could be. He listened, silent, then finally whispered, "If I try, will you be there?" She took his hand gently. Every step. The hospital board was shocked. The billionaire who had signed his death warrant now demanded experimental therapies. Evelyn's colleagues warned her she was treading dangerous ground. Her personal involvement with a patient could cost her career. But she didn't care. She stayed through the sleepless nights, when the chemo raged through his body like fire. She held his hand when nausea bent him over in pain. She laughed with him during the rare moments of energy, when he joked about buying the hospital just to make her his personal doctor. And somewhere in that storm of suffering and resilience, something bloomed. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just admiration. It was the kind of quiet, undeniable bond that forms when two souls recognize each other in the darkness. Alexander began to change. He asked Evelyn about her patients, about the children in the wards, about the families who couldn't afford the care he once took for granted. He started writing checks, not for buildings with his name, but for foundations in her honor. No legacy, he said, is worth anything unless it helps someone else stand when they would have fallen. One evening, when the city lights glowed like fireflies beyond his window, Alexander confessed something that made Evelyn's breath catch. "For the first time in my life," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't feel like a man waiting to die. I feel alive, and it's because of you." Evelyn felt her heart ache, torn between duty and feeling. She reminded herself of the boundaries, the ethics, the danger of letting emotions cloud judgment. Yet when she looked at him, fragile but fighting, she couldn't deny the truth. He wasn't just a patient anymore. He had become someone she cared for deeply, someone who had touched her soul as much as she had touched his. The treatments didn't cure him. The doctors had been right about the odds. But they gave him something more valuable than years. They gave him meaning in the months he had left. He spent them building charities, reconciling with estranged employees he had wronged, and even visiting schools funded by his donations. Wherever he went, Evelyn was there, sometimes in her white coat, sometimes simply by his side. On his final day, the hospital room was quiet, bathed in golden sunset. Alexander's breathing was shallow, but his eyes were calm. He reached for Evelyn's hand one last time. "Promise me," he whispered, "that you'll keep saving stubborn fools like me. That you'll remind them life is still worth fighting for." Tears blurred her vision, but she smiled through them. "I promise." He closed his eyes with peace, not fear. And though the world would remember him as a billionaire, Evelyn would always remember him as the man who finally learned how to live in the shadow of death. After his passing, the foundation he created continued to grow, touching countless lives. Schools, clinics, and scholarships bore witness to a transformation that began in one quiet hospital room, with a dying millionaire and a doctor who risked everything to reach his soul. And Evelyn, she carried his memory not as a burden, but as a gift. Every patient she touched afterward carried a piece of that promise, a promise that no one, no matter how broken, should ever give up on the chance to find meaning, even at the edge of life. Because sometimes, the greatest cure is not in medicine, but in compassion. Sometimes, saving a life doesn't mean adding years, but restoring the will to live the ones left. And sometimes, two people meet not by chance, but by destiny, so that one soul can remind the other what it truly means to be alive. This is 1,600 words tailored for narration, emotional, cinematic, and engaging. Would you like me to also adapt this into a slower, dialogue-rich script format with pauses, scene descriptions, and emotional beats so it sounds more natural when read aloud for YouTube?